For the past 6 or 7 months, this little bugger has been sitting on my bench, in pieces, waiting for my attention. I started this project back in March of this year. It was a very beaten up 1970s Seiko chronograph with a 6139B movement fitted. The outer appearance was awful, and the inner workings, well, that didn't look much better. This was an eBay special, a watch that I purchased as a non-runner, with me thinking, well, how hard can it be to get this sorted out? The dial was damaged to the point that it might need replacing, and I thought, well, no problem. It's usually quite easy to obtain those. The hands were rough, and of course the minute recording hand was even completely missing. Again, I thought, no problem, easy enough to get. There was a missing pusher, not an issue, I'm sure I can find a couple of new ones. The crown was bent. Again, not an unusual part, should be easy enough to grab hold of a new one. The back. Well, the back was not the correct one. This was my first major warning sign that this was a Franken watch, but as luck would have it, a friend of mine had a spare case, exactly the same, and so I grabbed that off him, and now at least the case is whole again. So my plan was to replace the seals, the glass, the dial, the hands, and the crown, and the pushers in order to bring this watch back to life. Well, let's talk real. What with having to also change the watch back to an original, you might wonder what was the purpose of even getting involved. Most of the original purchase was going to end up in the bin anyway, and that's not to mention that the strap was most likely not an original, and I was most likely going to have to change that also, except for one thing, the movement. The 6139B movement is not the cheapest little beast to find. Even decades-old ones that don't even work are being peddled online for silly amounts. So at least I had a good movement, right? I picked up the watch for a really good price, much cheaper than I've seen individual movements for sale, so it was worth a punt. Well, no, it wasn't good either. In fact, it was in quite bad shape. Now, I did publish a video back in March documenting my first foray into this watch restoration, and I found quite a few problems that needed to be dealt with. But unfortunately, I could not complete that task due to several factors, some of which were in my control and others were outside of my control. But that being said, for many months now, the watch has been sitting in a dust container, waiting for parts and for my attention in order to complete the job. I was even dumb enough to have left the case and the bracelet in the ultrasonic machine by mistake when I had to visit some of my wife's family up north. Now, upon my return, I found that all the water had evaporated. I had used washing up liquid in the machine, and this, I guess, had some salt content, and this would not normally be a problem with stainless steel, but evidently the strap had a botch repair done in the past where the steel bar attaching the Z-snap to the bracelet was replaced with a non-stainless bar, and this, well, seemed to have corroded and made a nasty mess. Now, perhaps a blessing in disguise, as the non-stainless bar should never have really been installed in the first place, and it could have caused health problems to the wearer if left in place. The good thing is, no permanent damage was caused, and it was just a simple case of using a wire brush to get rid of the corrosion. For those who saw the first video, you might wish to skip ahead to the timestamp shown on the screen now. But for those who didn't see it, let's just carry on. And removing the back has revealed the movement, and we can observe quite a bit of corrosion, indicating moisture ingress. The oscillating weight is very tarnished and pitted, and I can see rust around the movement ring and the operating levers. And I can remove the movement ring, which serves to keep the movement stable in the case, but it also retains the chronograph pushers. And here we can see the corrosion caused to the movement ring, and of course this will have to be cleaned up later. But for now, I can continue to remove the pusher, and I can see that the spring is missing. However, I'm not really concerned about this as I'm going to replace both pushers as a set anyway, and providing I can get this watch working well. So all that's left is to remove the crown and the stem, and the movement can be removed from the case. And yes, the dial is in absolutely awful shape. The minute recording hand is missing, and the other hands, well, they look like they've seen much better days. And with the dial wobbling around like this, I'm pretty sure a dial foot is broken. Now the plastic spacer between the dial and the movement is disintegrating, and it looks like it was glued to the dial at one point. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it yet, but I'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. I've wound the mainspring just a little bit, and I was quite surprised to see a little bit of life, so I decided to place it on the Timegrapher, and well, it definitely would not receive any chronometer certification at this stage, but it's good to at least see a little bit of life. Now taking a look at the balance, we can see that it's out of true. In fact, it looks quite buckled. I'll take a closer look at that shortly, but for now, I want to strip the rest of the case to pieces. And after taking off the bezel, I can see that either the glass is not original or it has broken in the past and it's been glued in place. There's glue all around this bezel and the tachometer dial. It's an absolute mess. Okay, let's take a closer look at the balance. Well, the first thing I've noticed is that the hairspring is quite distorted or bent out of position. It looks like there's quite a kink near the stud, but fortunately it's not broken, so no doubt it can be dealt with. Now I'll remove the balance from its cock, and I need to remove the balance spring from the wheel and just see how bad the buckle is. And here we can observe three things. The hairspring is also twisted slightly upwards. The top pivot of the balance staff, well, that's bent. And we can see the distortion of the balance wheel. Now I've placed the balance in my truing tool to illustrate the distortion. Now looking back at the movement, we can see that the pallet cock has been rubbed down, most likely in an attempt to compensate for the balance problems. Now, in fact, you can even see brass debris in the pallet pivot jewel and on the exit pallet stone. But moving on, I shall remove the automatic bridge, and we can see here that the screws do not match. Actually, the smaller one doesn't look original. And here we can see that the minute recording jumper spring is either not adjusted correctly or is bent, or more likely it may be a combination of both, but we can deal with that upon reassembly. So now I'll continue and remove the chronograph bridge, which is secured with 3 screws, and this exposes many of the chronograph components. And here I can see that the bushes for the minute recording wheel and its intermediate wheel are damaged, and they'll need to be replaced. I shall continue and remove the hammer spring. The minute recording wheel and its intermediate wheel comes out next. And now I can remove the operating lever spring. And now I shall continue by removing the hammer and the coupling levers. Now I shall remove the pillar wheel. The ratchet wheel can now be removed. And the click spring. Now I can remove the pallets. And turning the movement over, I can remove the calendar works and the dial side components. And now I can remove the train wheel bridge. And I can remove the train wheels, including the chronograph runner wheel, which I can see has a problem with the pivot. I'll need to try and find a replacement. And finally, I can remove the keyless works components. And that's the movement dismantled, but the work is only just starting. Now we have a lot of repairs to complete if this watch has any chance of a second life. Now I've now cleaned the parts, and there are a few problems to deal with, which we'll go through now. The first is a relatively simple job. As you may observe, the oscillating weight is quite tarnished and pitted. I'm just going to use some light abrasive papers to clean away the tarnish and make it look a little bit more presentable. Now I cleaned the parts in my ultrasonic cleaner, and while sorting through the cleaned components, I noticed that this rivet had come loose from its location. Well, the only problem is, I was not sure which location. Anyhow, I was inspecting the chronograph runner wheels and found the cam on the minute recording wheel. It was loose, which solved the mystery of the loose rivet. Now I'm going to use my staking set to attempt to reseat the rivet and tighten it again. And that seems tight enough. Next, I need to improve the truing of the balance wheel, and as you may remember, it is quite buckled. Now to help me, I'm going to use this truing tool to indicate the damaged portion of the balance wheel. I'm marking the high points with a Sharpie. And now I'm attempting to straighten the buckle out of the wheel with my tweezers. Now I'm being very gentle here, as I don't want to distort the wheel and make it worse than it already is. I place it back on the truing tool several times until I have the wheel as straight as I can possibly make it. And finally, when I test, I can see that it's now quite straight. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's much better, and I hopefully will provide a much better performance. And now the hairspring. The hairspring was also a little bit bent out of shape, and this is not a repair I can easily video, but I did remember that a company had sent me this microscope to review, and I thought I'd give it a go. Now I've never repaired a hairspring under a microscope before, but well, let's just give it a go anyway. Now looking at the recording here, you may notice that the coils are uneven, and this is not normal. Now, aside from the terminal curve, with this type of hairspring, the coils would usually be evenly spaced out. In fact, this is quite easy to diagnose. You'll notice that the second coil in on the left is too tight, and the opposite side has a spacing which is too large. The basic task here is to close the spacing which is too large, just enough to make the gap equal all the way around. Now I'm looking for the largest part of that gap, and my point to manipulate will be 90 degrees from there. And indeed, when I inspect the area 90 degrees away from the largest part of the gap, I can see a slight kink. Now that's my point of manipulation. So using two pairs of tweezers, I can hold the hairspring steady and move the coil in with the lightest touch. And as you can see, that's made a remarkable difference already. Now I shall continue tweaking until I'm happy with the result. Now I'm going to secure the hairspring back to the balance cock. Now observe here that the hairspring collet would normally be resting exactly over the jewel hole. Also, the terminal curve of the hairspring has a slight kink and should follow the path of the index. Now if it doesn't, then you'll get unexpected results when you adjust the index to regulate the watch. Now that would be frustrating. So to illustrate this, I'll locate the hairspring behind the index and move its position. Now with a well-adjusted hairspring, the location of the hairspring collet should not move. But because the terminal curve is not adjusted to follow the path of the index, well, this collet does move. This is not good. Now I'll continue tweaking the spring until I'm happy with the result. And as you can see, the collet now stays in position over the jewel no matter what the position of the index is. But I'm not satisfied. There's also a twist in the spring which needs to be dealt with. I find it easier to deal with twists when the hairspring is dismounted, so let's take it off the balance cock and inspect it further. Okay, that looks quite bad, but in reality, it only looks like one twist. Now I've determined that the twist starts here, so I'm just going to manipulate it from this point. And that looks better. Let's mount it back on the balance cock and test it. And yes, that looks a lot better. And so now, with the parts cleaned and most of the repairs complete, I can chuck the movement back together. and I'm going to start by installing some of the dial side components. And now I shall reassemble the mainspring and the barrel. And I can install the barrel and train of wheels. By the way, do you remember I mentioned that the chronograph runner wheel needed replacing? The top pivot was damaged. I managed to order a new one. It was quite expensive, and it was advertised as new old stock. Well, it turned up, and I was stupid enough not to inspect it immediately, but to place it in with the other spare parts that I'd purchased already for this assembly. Now that was a mistake, as it turned out the part sent to me was not for a 6139B and definitely would not be suitable. Now it looked the same, but it wasn't the same. I suspect maybe it was for a 6138, but in any case, it was too late to return it, and I decided not to purchase another. Actually, I couldn't find another, so I took a punt at repivoting the old wheel. I had nothing to lose, really. So I dismantled the wheel from the pivot. This wasn't an easy task, and it was incredibly risky, but I managed it. And then I drilled out the old pivot with what I think was a 0.2mm carbide drill. When I had the hole deep enough, I turned down some blue pivot steel to fit. and I use some Loctite to secure the new pivot to the wheel arbor. And after reassembling the wheel, I was able to continue reassembling the watch movement. Now with the train wheels secured with their bridge, I can install the cannon pinion and the motion works along with some of the calendar components. And I can install the pallets. Now on with the click spring. The ratchet wheel goes on next. And typically the pillar wheel should be installed before the bridge is secured, but I do remember being more concerned with getting the chronograph runner wheel sorted. However, I install it now, and well, all seems fine. Now I can continue and install the chronograph components. Now remember, I mentioned that there were 2 damaged bushes in the chronograph bridge. I originally planned to replace them both with jewels, but I didn't have an appropriate sized jewel for the minute recorder wheel. Now, I've one for the intermediate wheel, so I can install that, and I have a bush from another 6139B chronograph bridge, which I can swap out with this one. So that's the new jewel fitted. I can swap out this bush and then we can continue to put the movement back together. Now the height of the jewel needs to be adjusted. I'll need to remove the chronograph bridge again and give it a tweak. And that seems great now. Now I need to install the balance, and I'm making sure the impulse pin is lined up with the pallet fork. To judge the location of the stud, I'm just placing the balance cock over the wheel. And I can place the hairspring assembly with the stud in that rough location. And then the hairspring collet can be properly secured to the balance staff. And now the balance can be secured to the balance cock. And with that done, the whole balance assembly can be fitted to the movement. And there's life. Now still a bit of wobble, but it's a lot better than before. Now I can lubricate the end stones. The minute recording jumper needs to be dealt with next. Now first I shall assemble it to the movement loosely. And as you may notice, the spring is not engaging with the wheel. I can turn this eccentric in order to position the spring correctly. And with that done, I can test and make sure that the chronograph runner is able to drive the minute recorder. And that looks good enough, so now I can fully secure the jumper. There is another issue. The automatic ball bearing is very worn. Now I decided to replace the whole bridge with an admittedly bad looking one, but the ball bearings is in much better shape. After cleaning up the weight, the brass has been exposed. I thought I'd give this magic rhodium product a go. I followed the instructions and applied it to the metal surface. And after allowing it to dry, I rubbed it off with a soft cloth, and actually, it didn't look bad at all. So now I can install the automatic components. And a quick test on the timing machine shows me that we have something usable now. Although not seen here, there is some positional error which I will try to tweak when I get a bit of time, but the result is certainly encouraging. Okay, moving on, I can finish installing the calendar components. And on with the new dial. This is an aftermarket dial, but it does look good. I also found some aftermarket replacement hands, which are the same as the original design. In fact, this is the third set. I ordered a set of these along with the dial. They were not in the package though. But actually, this is the second dial, as the first one that was sent had a flaw. I ordered a second set from a supplier in Spain, but around the same time the pandemic hit and all the restrictions that came with it, and they couldn't be sent to my location here in Thailand for up to 6 weeks. And they offered me a full refund or the option to wait. Well, I decided to wait, but even after they claimed they dispatched the hands, I didn't receive them. Almost 3 months later, they offered, and I accepted a refund. I ordered another set from the Philippines, and they arrived within 4 days. And then the next day, would you believe, the set that I'd ordered from Spain turned up more than 3 months late. I contacted that seller in Spain and offered to pay him again, which he gladly accepted, and he was actually quite amazed that I'd contacted him. So anyway, I have 2 sets now, one of which I've just fitted, and I think it's looking nice. And now time to assemble the movement back into the case. As you can see, I've cleaned it up. I have a new glass, a new gasket, a new crown, and a set of chronograph pushers with their springs. And now I can fit the new crown. Sorry this is out of focus, but I found here that the crown did not fit, and actually it was because it was the wrong tap size. Now I remembered I had an old box of Japanese crowns. I'd purchased these years ago from Gleaves in London, and Londoners will recognise how long ago by observing the phone dialing code. Gleaves are still in business today, and they used to be my go-to supplier when I lived in London. It's a great little place just tucked away in Clerkenwell. Anyway, luckily I found these. There was 1 or 2 suitable crowns in this box. So now I can fit the new pushers. The old spring retainer for the movement ring was corroded too much. My solution is to use a 0.75mm rubber gasket, which will do the job of keeping the movement ring secure when the back is fitted. Now on with the oscillating weight and the watch back. Now I'm going to fit a new bar to this strap for the sake of this video, but my intention is to swap this out for a leather strap. I'm not really sure if this strap was the original anyway, but I think for my preference the look of the watch will be improved with a nice soft leather one. And with that, the watch is finished and will likely give me some enjoyment for quite a few years. I do need to tweak the timing a bit, but the bulk of the work is done and I'm pleased with it. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, it would really help the channel if you just leave a like, and please subscribe if you've not already done so, and click the bell icon. That will cause YouTube to inform you when I publish new content. And as always, thanks to my patrons who've helped to make this channel sustainable, but that's it for now. See you in the next one. Bye bye.